conversation. Let me introduce the panel really quick. We have Doug Payne from All Tour Travel. We have Terry Marino from Aspen Dental. We have Beth Toffel from Footprint ID. We have Valia Cox from her bank. I'm sorry, Valia. What is your company again? I apologize.
It's financial services.
Thank you. Mike McCormick from Travel Again. Lisa Simpkins from Deal Captains. Kate King from ISOS. And Charlie Mitchell from Deal Captains. I am Ann Blythe from Deal Captains as well. We are excited to be here to cover these issues. So what I'm going to do is hand the conversation and let Mike McCormick, our legislative lead in the travel industry, start us off. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I'm going to share my screen here for a moment and just to kick off with a few just observations about the industry and maybe a little bit of just setting the stage for the discussion we're going to have today. First off, just wanted to kind of put out there that the assumption we're working under is that we're still really in a pre-recovery mode. As we all know, we're working our way back to a place where we can really have solid footing as an industry and start to rebuild and recover in a sustainable way. We've had some and continue to have some signs of optimism about travel picking up, certainly led mostly by the leisure sector and leisure domestic, I would say would be the categorization. And that's good news. And certainly the policies in terms and activities in terms of the vaccine dissemination, starting to get to that point where we're a tipping point, hopefully not too far in the distant future, where it'll be open call for vaccine distribution here in the US and other countries, having varying degrees of success. But as that starts to happen, I mean, that gives us a health basis to at least start the recovery as well. And that's kind of our assumption. And for business travel specifically, I don't think we're really looking at a start before September in terms of starting to see, some real activity and some pickup in business travel. But also, I think, as we know, we've got a long road ahead. And that's what also part of the discussion today. And I think basically what our learnings have shown us from past recoveries, albeit we've never had something as devastating to our industry as this. But if you look at kind of our past activity, past recovery, and certainly the one from 2009 that really reached a travel peak in 2019, the key to that was international outbound business travel. And it is because in a global economy, until we get those, basically that opened again, and in our case, really get quarantines and restrictions, starting to dial those back and put real plans in place to open up international business again and business travel again, that's going to again lead a sustainable recovery. So we know that from the past, we know that, going forward. And so that's why, again, this discussion we're having today is so critical. It's about really aligning, all of our activities and interests to drive business travel forward. The thing that undermining this to some degree, and something we all have to be, I think, mindful of, is that traveler confidence has taken a hit, and in a way that we've never really seen before. And what's happened, and if you look at the averages, we've been measuring here in the U.S. traveler confidence, polling, basically people who identify themselves as travelers, both for leisure and business. If you look at the averages, you would say, well, generally people are concerned, because you're averaging overall around a 3, right? Plus or minus some, for both business and leisure and month to month. The reality is, though, when you dig deeper, the people who are truly ready to travel is very low. And it means that unlike anything we've ever seen before, it's really undermined people's confidence in traveling. Meaning that, and from a business travel perspective, it means that even when companies are ready to travel again and begin saying, okay, it's time to get back on the road, time to meet, have internal meetings in person, starting to really, gauge, pick up that activity again, The underlying problem is that we're still going to have to do a lot of work, and it's going to take a longer amount of time to put an infrastructure in place that reassures people about traveling. We know that the work that the airlines have done, the hoteliers have done, ground transportation, in terms of making the parts of the travel experience that they actually control safe, but it's the whole trip experience and the risk and all of the issues that and perceptions that people have about traveling, and fears even once vaccinated. That still we're going to have a lot of work to do to communicate, and certainly for travel buyers, play a critical role in that. And then finally, I mean, from an advocacy perspective, I think that lower, the visual at the bottom kind of sums it all up. And that's what we've been focused on, which is we're going to need to come up with a way to integrate testing for the long term into our travel experience. Like we had to do with terrorism in terms of how we created a whole infrastructure to support a secure environment, we're also going to have to do that to create an environment for a healthy environment for travel. So that means testing and vaccines and the ability to prove that or basically have some sort of verification, preferably, not a physical one, but a digital one, will be critical to making that whole engine turn and making all that work efficiently. And then the mass means basically basically doing the things we're doing now: social distancing, mass, etc. Doing those things on a continuing to do them. Not, we kind of say, well, you might, if not meaning that you're making it mandatory for people to get vaccinated, but you're going to have to look at this as you do those things for yourself, meaning testing, vaccinations to protect yourself, but you wear masks and you do the things that in terms of the protocol we have in the travel environment to protect others. And so it's going to take everyone working together, but we are really focused on how do we eliminate the quarantines, roll those back, take the travel restrictions away, because we're in a position now where we're making progress on the health related things we need to do. The vaccine rollout is continuing, but we don't yet have a plan to reopen travel. Certainly not internationally, and domestically, again, here in the US, it's still, the CDC hasn't given clear guidance. They haven't given any guidance. They've basically said, continue to say no travel. So we need to do that. We need to rebuild traveler confidence. And hopefully with all of this, we can really get travel happening in a robust fashion again. So just a little bit of a setup for, how we're viewing things at Travel Again. Again, I can't say enough, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today, because I think there's a tremendous amount of work that the buyer community needs to do to help, get us all traveling again, and need to and will play a critical role in that way. So maybe I'll turn it back to you, Ann.
All right, and I just had one quick question from Katie Virtue about the news today, that the U.S. is looking at opening up some international travel in May, Mexico and Canada. So there's the thought there in the discussion, which we're going to get to, because that is going to open up a lot of craziness, I think, more than we're prepared for as far as chaos with travel, because as Mike said, we don't have a national mandate on travel and regulations or CDC. And so if you're going to Mexico, can you get back? Are you going to get stuck? So these are some of the things that, Mike, I think you might be able to say something quickly about those U.S. borders opening up.
Well, again, I mean, these are all promising, things, right? And I think we'll see more of it. But to your point, our ability to communicate effectively, dispel, a lot of the let's say misinformation that is out there too. It's difficult, right? Because a lot of this. There is a lot of, let's say, nuance to the message, right? It's not easy to make a blanket policy, because you've got people that fit, in all different ways: vaccinated, not vaccinated, tested, not tested. There's other considerations that people have to put into their own risk profile, right? So there's a lot, and we don't yet have a standard for how sort of digital health certification or validation is going to take place. So the work, there's again, a lot of work happening in terms of starting to build towards those deadlines. I think, it's actually the deadlines help us. I mean, just broadly, because it forces everyone to, policymakers, government officials, the private industry, the whole travel community, basically, to come together and try to drive towards common goals. So deadlines help, but also are concerning because, to your point, we want to be ready. And we want to put ourselves in a position where we don't have any setbacks either. As much as we're all so anxious for the industry to recover, and as much as people are, just generally would love to be able to travel again for both leisure and business, the worst thing could happen is we have setbacks. What we want, hopefully, is a healthy, sustained recovery that we can continue to make progress forward. I mean, all of the impact and will not happen, and the recovery will not happen overnight, nor should it. The best thing we can do is have, again, a planned and healthy recovery. So, but there'll be a lot of competing pressures, right? You can, and I'm sure you all want to hear the experiences that you all are having with your companies and attitudes. But I think there's a range of attitudes too, of companies that are out and traveling and you need to, as an essential part of their business, and are doing so today. But then obviously many more that are not at this stage. So again. Okay,
great. Well, and we'll get back to, the health passes and the COVID passes that are in place as well. But I really want to hit on, based on what you said, Mike, I want to turn this over to Charlie to talk about, the latest in the technology that has come about. There's a massive chaos of all kinds of technology, new systems, and everybody trying to get to the finish line. So Charlie, can you kind of cover what's out there and what's happening with this new technology based on all of these different things that are happening right now with COVID?
Yeah, and I think there's a couple interesting trends going on right now. And I think the key one I want to hit based off what Mike talked about is that traveler confidence problem, and really how can we use and leverage technology to start to, I think, aid in getting that number a little higher than that 3.0 average that we saw on Mike's chart. And I think the two things that really interest me are safety and security and pre-trip approval tools and how they relate to technology, because I think we've really seen those two things historically have always been, you need a pre-trip approval if your spend's over a certain amount, let's say $1,000, or you're going to somewhere where safety and security is high or extremely high. Well, right now, I would say pre-trip approval was probably somewhat the norm, that most travelers need approval from a VP or above just to go anywhere. So how we're going to make that efficient as things start to scale up and we can make those approvals flow quickly and in an efficient manner is really going to be a really big thing to keep an eye on, I think, for the next 6 months, at least to a year, in terms of both how we can make that really effective, I think, for the travel space. I think that's going to come into then kind of as we get into the traveler passports and how technology plays into that tools and how the TMCs work with that technology to integrate, whether it's QR code scanning or things like that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. But those are kind of the big things I'm keeping an eye on, I think, from the traveler's point of view, as we keep an eye on the bigger trend too of a lot of companies just within the TMC industry are starting to really combine, and you're starting to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions, and we're still just, I think, starting to see that space start to move a little bit, and how we can message the travelers, in particular TMC technology stacks. And it's going to be really interesting to see how those technology stacks move forward, enabling the travelers to be informed and to get that confidence level back up.
Fantastic. And this kind of gets into the nitty gritty of the conversation right now as I pass this on to Valia and Terry as our buyers here. And I'll start with you, Valia, with SWBC, your company. First, two questions. The first question is, as far as the safety and security, are you internally doing this within your company And then this flows into the second question: are you relying on your TMC to do this for you? Because what I've heard in the past is that TMC or buyers are now really relying on the TMCs to provide the technology for them. So can you kind of give me your thoughts on what your companies are doing? I'll start with you, Velia, because you have a bigger, more global, and Terry's company with Aspen is more national. So we can look at the perspectives.
Well, we also are national. We're a little tiny bit of global, but we were ready when this whole pandemic started. We had pre-trip approval previous to 2020, so we implemented that maybe 6 months prior. So we were really. It was a smooth transition. We had the visibility of where our travelers were. We were able to cancel all our tickets or cancel all our trips and get everybody back home safely. And for the security portion, at first it was more of communicating with, our travelers, trying to, I'm sorry, hang on 1 second. It was communicating to our travelers what exactly was happening in every state. Because I think it was June that it varied. You couldn't go into New York, but you could go into, you could go within Texas. And so that was a internal communication. We had our legal team that was advising us and telling us, okay, this is where they can go, and so forth. But then after that, right now, when everybody is ready to travel and Texas has opened up, it's more of the TMC that's helping us, that's partnering with us and giving those notifications on the travelers' itineraries. However, I think it's more of communication with the travelers to try to encourage them to read their communication now, and maybe that's probably where we're at right now with the safety and security.
And also, it would be important too, as far as the technology, messenger tools within what the TMs prefer. Yeah,
that would be great.
And then are you, as far as the messenger tools that you're looking at to get the communications out, are you looking at these new technology pieces as iBots and virtual agents in that, or are you relying on the agents, the availability of the agents through your TMC?
Right now, I do, since our travel is not very high right now, the communications between me and the traveler, I have a really great relationship with our travelers. They call me if they have any kind of hesitation. I'm looking at travel and contacting and letting them know, hey, this is what's going on. If something were to happen, please reach out to me. But we are looking at something within this group. We are talking about maybe some great innovative tools that could possibly be a really asset to our industry, but those are talked within us right now.
Okay, and that seems to be a common thing that I'm hearing with buyers, that internally within the companies, they're looking at more safety and security tools to connect with rather than relying on the TMC. So let me turn this over to Terry, and this is another question I'll ask you both if you're both worried about your travelers getting stuck. So Terry, let me throw this over to you, and with Aspen Dental and their acquisitions of new companies and growing, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, our people are really chomping at the bit to travel. We never really stopped. We are an essential service, and most of our travelers are, we're in the healthcare space, not just dental, but we also have urgent care and medical spa. So the protocols are second nature to them. In fact, the protocols that we have in our dental offices and our medical offices go beyond what is happening at hotels and car rental companies. And I mean, they're wearing full gear head to toe in some cases. And it's, like I said, it's second nature to them. So we're really not worried about I don't want to say we're not worried about them getting sick. We certainly don't want them to get sick, but we know that they're doing what they need to do, not just when they're traveling, but while they're working as well. And the only travel that's really stopped for us is meetings and events. Only because the meetings and events aren't happening, hence our people don't have to travel to them. But our day-to-day operations, that has not ceased at all. And in a lot of respects, there hasn't been much of a change. We have had to put pre-trip approval into place, but only for air and only below a certain level. And for us, that's been a big challenge. Charlie was talking about the the different technologies and how they're looking into how to improve those. So for the technology people that are out there, one thing that would be incredibly helpful to us is if there could be a pre-trip approval that's done before the employee even makes the reservation. I mean, having them go through the process of, what flight do I want? What this do I want? What's it going to cost? Because the pre-trip has nothing to do with the cost at this point. Is this essential travel? Do you need to go? And so if we could have that done, so the employee would go into the system, say, I'm requesting approval to go on this trip, have their approver make that approval, and then they just go ahead and book it, done. Because having it the other way, they're putting time and effort into something that might not ever even happen. And unless, unless the approver approves it immediately, there's a good chance that whatever they approved is going to change. And it's not going to get booked.
So that's a good point as far as being proactive with the technology. So we're looking at a proactive. Charlie, let me bounce this off of you. Are there tools out right now that are proactive versus during and post booking?
There are, yeah. So we're actually seeing that kind of what we call that request feature probably come across. I know Concur has a request feature, not to plug it all, but the nice thing is an open API. So even if you're not in the Concur tech stack, you can use that API to plug into any tool that you're using. But just to highlight that it is a trend that we are seeing, that more of that request style feature. As Terry mentioned, rather than before they even go through the process, you go through the steps initially to request that trip that you're going to go on, and then you can go ahead and once that gets made into that booking feature. So I think we are seeing some technology come out around that space. So definitely something to keep an eye on.
So, and with that, great lead in to our TMC panelists, Doug and Lisa. Doug, you with Altour, you've been in the TMC for a while, and as a TMC currently, what is your TMC doing with tech now? Because obviously the buyers are saying they're relying more on you. So what are the changes that you have to make and pivot quickly to get to this point to meet the buyer needs?
Yeah, thanks, Ian. No, I think it goes well beyond the technology. I think the role of the TMC now is more important than ever before, that we have to look at this from a holistic approach, not just technology, but, your TMC needs to keep up on changes that are happening in the regulatory world, technology world. What is it really going to take to get those business travelers back on the road again? And in our company, I can only speak for our company, we had the foresight to bring on a chief risk officer well before the pandemic started. And, I think communication with your customers, with your travelers throughout this whole process, because it's evolving. I mean, we look back at, what we were talking to our customers about last April is a lot different than what we're talking about now. So, I think the role of the TMC really is, this consulting role to help our, customers navigate through the technologies, help them with their travel policies, give them ideas and suggestions, working with our trusted suppliers, and bring the best to them so that they can make the right decisions on how to get their travelers back on the road again.
Good. And so this comes about, now there's a different kind of TMC. I know, Lisa, you're starting with deal captains, because going back to what's happening, Mike's on the right on the front lines in Washington, D.C., what's happening with the legislations. And what if we have an immediate change? COVID's done, then what? And then there's a chaos of travelers and something else comes. How quickly and how have you designed your new TMC to adapt to the future? Because obviously we want to change the conversation to being positive and we want to pivot quickly. So Lisa, what kind of, in your mindset, with your different kind of TMC are you doing to adapt to these buyers' needs?
You know, we are really founded on listening to the customer's voice. So, you know, we've spent a lot of time with several travel managers and industry leaders in really designing this new type of travel company, 100% based in the cloud. So we are able to, with our technology at least, be able to, you know, connect different APIs and different pieces of technology, you know, into our program very quickly. Gone are the days of having to, you know, load stuff on computers and, you know, have it across the network, you know, worldwide, right? So depending on what the specific customer's needs are is where we're going to focus. You know, we are pretty agnostic on any of the tools that we're working with. So that's one of the focus. You know, we've decided that we're not, you know, we're not a type of travel management company that puts customers in a box. You know, you create your program with us and it's a partnership, it's a consultative relationship, and we are there to support them through thick or thin. From a traveler well-being perspective, what we have done to support travelers on the road is to create a customizable travel well-being program. So it not only gives customers or travelers access to a mobile, online and mobile health and wellness app, so doing meditation, yoga, even access to a healthcare provider, mental health care provider. But we've also designed a COVID pre-flight screening process, as well as helping them create a backup plan in case they're on the road, maybe they get exposed, they can't get back. They have someone, a point in contact within our organization to reach out to. And then we also reach out to them, you know, a week before they travel to make sure they've got, you know, possibly, you know, one of the tests that are available to take with them. You know, is there a hotel in the area or the hotel that they're staying at? Are they going to allow them to quarantine there? So we're really kind of thinking outside the box and driving, you know, more of a customer focused approach to this and really consultative.
So based on this and what you're saying is we're getting, it feeds right into the next one as far as wellness and safety and security. And that thought of, will my travelers get stuck? Let me turn the conversation over to Kate and Beth, Kate King with ISOS, and kind of talk about on a national level, Kate, with your company, as far as ISOS, I think one of the big things that people are asking, number one, as far as the wellness and safety is, where is your information being pulled from? Is it directly from the government? Is it directly from where? I know that was a question we had one of the buyers in the past. And so I thought I'd address that as to kind of what's on the forefront for safety and security and where's information coming from in real time.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Thank you, Anne. So this is Kate with International SOS. I mean, I think from a safety and security standpoint, I want to go back a little bit in the conversation because the technology is super important to making all of this happen fast enough to be relevant. But you need to go a little bit further back the chain. And I think it really starts with planning. And to your point, when you introduce this topic, you're talking about the risk of potential chaos. If suddenly, for whatever reason, it's like borders are open, go. From my perspective, from a corporate organization, you don't want to be part of that, I think. And essential travel and the trip approval process is going to be extremely important. It already is. Most of the organizations that I speak with are planning now for when travel does start to ramp up? What do you need to have in place before you start sending people out to make sure that they feel confident? The last thing that you want to do is have people out traveling before they feel confident and coming back and that impacting their confidence. So I think the trip approval process is super important. I agree that as the requests start to increase, it needs to be able to be scalable, and that will involve technology. But I think that the decisions need to be made in advance. There needs to be a plan with what is permissible travel, what isn't, what is the criteria, and that will enable those decisions to be made quickly on the back end and allow an organization to scale up slowly. The last thing you want is to have a traveler showing up at a hotel who's anxious about traveling and it's 110% occupancy. They're not going to get that service that's going to make them feel like they want to go back again. They're going to come back and they're going to tell their colleagues that it was not as advertised. And I think, we can't control on the leisure side, but as travel managers, you can control that and share that information back with travelers, collect what your suppliers are doing, let travelers know that there is a plan in place. It helps, and it really helps with that mental health too. I think you were alluding to that anxiety that a lot of people are traveling right now. If there's one sort of positive thing that I can share with the group from sort of the medical consulting that we do on this topic, the mental health issues that you're hearing about and that everyone's concerned is going to be the next big thing. There's a lot that's within your control. There's a lot that a travel program can do to mitigate against that. It's sharing that information, making people feel confident. There's a lot of steps you can take. If somebody has anxiety, there is preparation you can do in the destination that they're going. You can research in advance the resources that might be available to them if they had a mental health issue while they were traveling. And having that plan in place gives travelers that sense of control. And that in turn will give them that confidence, I think, that they need.
So in going back, and there's some really good news on the horizon for the future, as we change the conversation, that there are tools out there now where you have the ability to have real-time information and wellness. And so one question before I get to Beth, because that's Beth's expertise here in a moment, but I want to really pinpoint, Kate, where is ISOS pulling information for the real time? There's a lot of companies out there and a lot of tech that are pulling maps out of COVID, but where they're getting their resources at a third party. But in actuality, the real information, real time, needs to come from a direct source connected to what we're going back to what Mike is and his connections with the government. So,
sorry, yeah, I didn't answer that. You asked me that before. Right. Yeah. So, well, I can only speak to International SOS. I think most of the providers in our space use a similar range of sources as we do. We rely very much on local contacts. So in our particular situation, we have a very, very broad global footprint with we have offices around the world, and when we don't have offices, we have a very strong network around the world. So when we are, for example, updating travel restriction information about entry and exit restrictions per country, we're working with local governments, we're working with local non-governmental sources, we're working with local police, we're working with partner security organizations in the destination. And beyond that, because when we're giving travelers advice, it's not strictly just based on entry and exit restrictions and do you need a COVID test. I don't think that that's enough information to make the trip approval decision these days. There's a little bit more. A common question is, what is hospital capacity? Okay, I'm going to Brazil, fine, I've got my passport, I've got my COVID test, I've got the letter that says I'm allowed to go there because I'm an essential worker. Did you know that all of the hospitals where you're going are at 95% capacity right now? What is your plan? Mm-hmm. Saying you can't go, but what is your plan if you do get sick and you can't get into a hospital there? And so and again, that information is very, very much coming from, again, our network in country, using Brazil as an example.
These are good points in that even on a national level, if you're traveling to countries and something happens to your travel, I'm sure a lot of travel managers and buyers haven't thought about this yet, but what happens if you're sick and you're in a different state or a different country? What then? And I'm going to pass this to Beth, because Beth's systems, what she has going on with her company and some ideas on what do you do in those circumstances and what are some of the tools to provide for your travelers. So Beth, why don't you talk a little bit about the wellness and those situations if they are sick suddenly on a business trip? You're on mute.
Yes, I am. Thank you. I knew I was going to do that. Thanks for that question. So yes, our core focus, as you said, is to make sure that travelers, both leisure and business, have immediate and timely access to their medical and health records when they're traveling, because we've all seen how the awareness has become increasingly raised about how important it is to have that information on hand. And I think that one of the things that we've all been talking about today in terms of traveler confidence, communication is really key. And all of the things that people are now afraid of or fear or think about before they travel, you know, if it's on the business side, you know, or even on the leisure side. But yes, what happens if I get sick when I'm away? So, you know, will I be able to stay where I am? Who's going to pay for it? How do I get the information that I need? And of course, we're focused on the piece of it. If you do have a health event when you're away, making sure that you have your information to create better health outcomes and potentially save a life. But I think that one of the really important things to think about as we move forward is that COVID did raise this awareness. There will be, in not so short order, post-COVID. You know, everyone is going to want to forget about it, you know, start partying like it's the roaring 20s, because everyone has this pent up, you know, we all know we're humans. We thrive on human connection. In the business world, people want to go back to their meetings and events and visiting with clients and customers and on the leisure side, certainly, I would imagine that everybody hears it the way that I do when I speak to people. You know, they talk about going away. Where are you going? I don't know. I'm just getting out of here, because everybody's feeling that. So I think that what's happened and what we need to focus on is, yes, COVID is of course critically important, and all of the information that surrounds that and in the current moment. But I think there's a change in the way that people approach their travel now, and the information they want, and the things we need to communicate, and the education that we need to give them as to what the resources are, because they now know that things can turn on a dime. It may not be COVID in 3 years. It may be something else. So what we need to do is create tools that make people feel comfortable, make them feel cared for by their employer or by wherever they're booking their travel or wherever they're staying, and that these resources and tools are in place. Again, whether it be COVID or whatever's next. And it may not be a pandemic. It may just be about you individually. What if, you know, God forbid somebody has a heart attack and they're away? What if somebody, you know, and then the other side of it is also making sure that you have the tools that you need to take care of the people that are at home if you're stuck somewhere. So I think it goes, COVID is the catalyst for this conversation, and it put us all in, you know, not a good mindset, but the mindset where we are now. And of course, it's increased the stress level of traveling. But I think we need to look beyond COVID and how this has just changed, you know, human nature and what we need and how we can protect our travelers going forward and from here on in.
Right, correct. And I do want to, and you lead into a question that one of our viewers has asked Terry, and I think it goes with Avelia for you to answer as well, but are you guys requiring your travelers to get COVID vaccines before they travel? Terry, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I was going to jump in on that before anyone answers, because
that's fine.
I think because it's a very sensitive issue, you know, and I think it's you know, it's one that, you know, we keep coming back to and hearing, and we take great pains to kind of, with our communication with folks that are creating policies and with the community at large. We're always trying to separate out from you know, this notion of like what you personally, you know, believe, what companies are, the positions they're taking, from really what we're trying to create, which is we're not taking a stance on whether someone needs to be vaccinated. We're not taking a stance on, you know, what, you know, testing and other safe alternatives, or how do we create. We're just saying, here's what's going to need to be required. And everybody's got to make their own, and companies too have to make their own decision about how to respond to that. And I don't think we'll see a place, you know, despite some of the earlier like commentary from like the CEO of Qantas and some of the trial balloons that were put out there about saying we're going to require vaccination. I think pretty much uniformly everyone's backed off from that. Not people were, I don't think we're on board with that position to begin with, but I think largely what's happened is there's been a really just an acceptance that like we need to do the things that make our system safe for the long term. We need to accommodate the fact that you're going to have a variety of kind of individual views. As companies, we're focused on risk mitigation and protecting our folks as best we can. But, you know, I think, again, most of the time, I think we're going to be in a position where we're going to have to make allowances for all of that. And just knowing that even though like here in the US, for example, even though there's vaccine, you know, we're getting, the vaccination rate is going fast and will continue to go. You're still not going to have 100% of the population vaccinated ever, but you're also not going to have, it's going to be hard to get through, you know, the further along you get, the longer it will take to get the next, you know, next percent, the next 5%, 10%, et cetera, vaccinated. So we've just got, again, a long road ahead. All that being said, what I keep bringing it back to too is we say this a lot too, which, you know, we called our initiative Travel Again, right? To try to really pull together the entire global travel industry behind a set of principles. But it's also about never again. And I saw, and I man, Beth, when you said that, you got heads nodding, you know, very enthusiastically from this group, because, you know, I think we as the travel industry, and certainly a lot of folks, the practitioners in it, are really tasked with figuring out how we can prevent this from ever having an impact like this again. Because I think, you know, you're putting your head in the sand if you think we are in a place where this is never going to happen again, right?
Right.
Yep. Right.
Absolutely.
This is the realities of a global economy, of the fact that we're traveling the world. I mean, there's so many benefits from it,
right?
But this is these are some of the realities of what we face, right? That, you know, it's not just the economic impacts, but you can have a health event or an outbreak in a remote part of the world, and it won't take months or years to make its way through. We're talking days and weeks, you know, for the rest of the world to be exposed.
And that's why I think, to your point, we need to make sure that we're not just focused on a duplication of this particular thing, but think about the bigger picture. And
right.
You know,
and putting systems and tools and capabilities in place. You know, and that's the point. The positive part of this is, like, you know, you try to make something out of all this, right? Well, we can't go back and get back the last year of our lives, and we all wish, I mean, man, if we could do it over again, right? In many ways. But everybody's working really hard to figure it out. And I see this, you know, again, and the other thing, and I'll turn it back over, but man, you know, Doug, you talked about communication, and that came out too. Boy, I'm telling you that the biggest part of this, even from, you know, the view, and certainly and with policymakers in Capitol Hill, you know, in EU, and around the world, you can't assume that everybody's been able to talk to each other and communicate and collaborate, right?
Right.
We've done, you know, we took the initiative of pulling a roundtable together of all of the top, you know, travel trade associations from all over the world, and said, come on, let's get together and let's just get working together in a different way than we have in the past, right? To speed up the process and the efforts. I mean, the response has been outstanding, and it's not because people didn't do it or didn't want to do it or didn't want to have it happen. Everybody's working so hard, heads down, in the area they're focused on, that they didn't have the time to step back and say, let's help focus our efforts. I could say the same thing for all of you with your travelers and with your customers. You know, you can't assume that everybody's read the 97,000 news articles of the day and they're current and they're aware, right?
Right.
There's no way any one person could keep up on all this activity,
right?
And it's changing all the time.
Right. We focus in this industry, you know, we're part of what we do. And and we have trouble keeping up. So the layperson,
Yeah.
you know, I think one of the most important components is that the information has to easily flow, and it doesn't have, it can't require a lot of work on the traveler's part. It needs to be right there for them. We need to make it easy, and that communication, you know, is critical.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well,
And I think that
you being from Texas, communication is great, absolutely great. But I think we have to acknowledge that sometimes communication, we have to go old school and go to text messaging, because Texas had that outage. And what I've been saying from the beginning is the hoteliers have been, I think the focus hasn't been on them. And when we had this outage, how I missed those hoteliers that were there for me. You went online and tried to book a hotel. It said it was available, but unfortunately that hotel had no power, and that was not able to communicate that they did not have rooms. So then what would a travel manager do? They'd reach out to their hotel partner, and nobody was there. So communication has to be in all types of forms. It could be either a forum, but also text messaging, and this networking with each other, with everybody. That is the best way to communicate, and being involved in something like this to be able to get together.
And and I need to interject because we have about 15 minutes left, and I do want to include some of our attendees. There's some hot conversations going on, going back to the vaccinations, and a lot of people are saying, number one, they can't talk about within their companies people getting vaccinated, and number two, worldwide, one of the comments was that worldwide many people, travelers, will not get vaccinated. So does that mean they can't travel? And circling back to, you know, Mike, the health passes that maybe the CDC may be requiring, that's been a big topic. You know, can you travel and get on a plane unless you have a health pass? And when COVID goes away, is that going to be mandated? So, I mean, I really want to include our travelers, and and reflecting back to Valia, not to, you know, with the communications and the technology, flowing that full circle as to what we're talking about. But I think the biggest thing that we want to do is the current situation we're faced with maybe the health pass, and what does that do for our travel moving forward? And in the positive conversation is what we're saying is exactly what our legislators need to hear to open up travel so that we can travel. So we're changing.
If I could interject something here. I mean, I think one of the other things we haven't talked about is the role of testing. And this is another one of those areas where to say that, you know, that testing is going to be something we've had to do and you know, we'll get away from is, again, I think misguided. We have to think about long term how testing is going to play an ongoing role.
Right.
You're not just looking at, you know, COVID-19. You're talking about COVID-X, like the next or the next or the next. And having a testing protocol and having systems in place that you can ramp up or ramp down according to, you know, the environment is going to really be critical. I don't know if you followed this, but earlier, this going back probably, well, it seems like a long time ago. It's probably like 2 or 3 weeks, but there was the CDC and Secretary Buttigieg had kind of intimated they were thinking about, you know, requiring testing for domestic flights here in the U.S. And very quickly, the industry coalesced and got behind an effort to go back and say, no, that we can't, this is going to be just debilitating. I mean, we're already struggling to get people traveling again. We are safe. We you know, and push back. And so the CDC walked back those comments and said, no, you know, it's just a thought, you know, and they kind of, you know, somewhat awkwardly, but we're able to kind of re-step backwards from that statement and that position. And the problem was, as an industry though, and back to the travelers or prospective travelers, we didn't communicate that the reason for that was not that we're as an industry against testing. It's just that testing infrastructure doesn't exist.
Right.
and we need to build it. And part of that, and part of that is low cost testing, which is coming. I mean, there will be, you know, it's like what we saw in the vaccine, the race to provide. Like the providers are working aggressively to get to the point where we can have, you know, at a cost of $10 or less, a home test that you can video verify that can be done instantly. You know, I mean, that will exist, but it doesn't yet. And, you know, we need to think about, you know, for international travel, you're going to have a certain set of requirements around testing. You're going to potentially, you know, vaccinated versus unvaccinated, you might have a different protocol. That's okay. But to answer the question, the intention should never be to prevent people from traveling. The world will never be 100% vaccinated. We know that. We have to make that, you know, build that into our thinking and say, okay, you know, how do we do this? And how do we clearly communicate about what those standards or requirements are, and do that in cooperation with governments, with, you know, so that everybody's on the same page with this. And again, we're all trying to figure this out, you know, day by day, week by week as we go here. It's not, it wouldn't be perfect anyway. It certainly isn't, because we are just figuring it all out. But I do think there is a place we can get to, hopefully fairly quickly, to say, okay, you know, you can always make exceptions, but let's set a standard, right? Let's have a standard we're working from, and then we can make decisions about whether, you know, in a lower or higher risk environment where you might have some variances, that's okay. For your travelers, that is, you imagine that world and your ability to communicate about what's required. It gets a lot easier. And that's where we need to get to too. So a lot in there, but I was gonna say that we haven't specifically talked about testing, but testing is a huge part of this too. And the ongoing need to be able to verify that you've been tested, you know, if it's cheap and simple, I mean, it would be terrific for the long term of our industry, right? So that we don't have to have these, you know, the same impact that we've had if we have another outbreak of some kind.
Right.
Well, and quickly, very important there is the collaboration. It's going to take a lot of collaboration and communication, like we're doing today. You know, we're having these discussions.
Right. And Doug, this leads in, thank you, because you just led into, we've got a lot of questions and a lot of things coming up, but to tie this in, because we have a few minutes and a short response, I have a direct question for our buyers and our TMC. So Terry, one of the questions is, who's making the decision within your company to say it's okay to travel? Is it your HR, your finance, your legal team, or your travel manager, or it just doesn't matter, they're just going? Quick response, you know, and then you're traveling now. So are you ready 100% for your travelers?
Well, again, we don't travel internationally. We only travel domestically in the US. And the only requirement that we have for pre-trip approval is for air. Ground and hotel it does not require approval. And over a certain level doesn't require approval. It should also be noted that we are considered an essential service. So, you know, when we have people traveling, it's to provide healthcare for our customers, for, you know, our patients. And the people who are making the determination, who are making the approval, it is not a finance approval. It is the senior vice president level or above for whatever division it is that employee is traveling for. And it's just looking at it, is this essential? Is the purpose for your travel in order to serve our patients? And if it is, then it's approved. And the cost is not, it has nothing to do with what the cost is. It's whether or not it's necessary to provide service to our patients. And I do think that there's been quite a bit of, I don't want to say, you know, there's the whole visual guilt thing where, oh, you mean I have to get approval? You know, so I think that has played into some decrease in air travel. So, you know, if you're traveling somewhere that's, you know, under, say, 6 hours of driving, then people may be choosing to drive instead of fly. You know, drive and feel more comfortable about being exposed to other people. They're in a car, they're kind of in their own little bubble. So they're not going to bother getting on a plane because they'd rather have that safety. And in addition, quite frankly, there's less flights, there's less nonstop flights. There are airports that have shut down. And a lot of our markets are secondary and tertiary. And I mean, I flew somebody into Clovis, New Mexico last week. You have no idea how difficult that was. You know,
it's difficult on a normal basis.
Yeah, I mean, I'm getting the rental car for them to be there at, oh my goodness. I mean, I literally, I'm not kidding you, spent over 2 hours making arrangements to have a rental car delivered to Clovis, New Mexico airport. It was, I will never fly anybody into that airport. They're going to fly into Lubbock and drive.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
We're getting to the top of our hour. I mean, we could go on for hours, you guys, and that's what I love is this conversation. But, you know, I have to kind of reel it in. And I know it sounds like the combination of mergers and technologies, our TMCs are ready, you know, getting ready and ramping up. How fast we could do that sounds like it. Valia and Terry is buyers. I love your frankness of, you know, hey, we need the TMCs to get going faster. You know, we need, you know, legislations to all come together. We all are coming together to say, hey, in order to start the economy and get these travelers going, we need to have these national legislations and change the conversation to positive. And the only way we can do it is by talking frankly and saying, hey, you know, this is not okay, or this is working or not working. You can't have a perception or whatever. It is what it is, and you take it and you pivot it and you move forward into the future. We have a vision of what it would like to be, and now we can move back and do the steps. So next panel, and that's why we're doing a series of 4 panels. So next panel, I invite you guys all to join us. And we will be talking and covering more of the U.S. and EMEA and how that is affecting EMEA and the travel. A lot more issues. There's ground transportation. There's more to safety. We could go on, but we're hoping that this panel has given you, open the doors for thought, open the doors of what we can do, and change our conversation. If you guys have any questions or whatever, we'll be happy to answer them. You know, add them in the questionnaire. As much as we'd like to go on and on and on, I thank everybody. I thank Doug and Terry and Beth and Kate and Lisa, Mike and Valia, Charlie and Tams and Deal Captains for sponsoring. And Tams, if you guys are interested in getting involved in Tams, certainly follow the links. But again, thank you panelists and thank you attendees for joining and being so interactive. We love hearing what you really want to say. That's the only way we're going to make the change, and we'll turn it around. So thank you, everybody, and we look forward to our next panel in April.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, Tam.
Hi, everybody.